Are we sicker than other countries? What's going on? So I pulled data from the Office of Economic Development, and I learned that the United States spends more on healthcare and disease management than any other country on the planet. 18 cents of every dollar that we spend in our economy is spent on sickness, healthcare, and managing disease. We know it. We know what we have to do, going to the doctor's office, to the pediatrician, to buy the medicine that we need. We know it. But what's it going to do to us? And how is this creating a greater impact? We spend $9,000 per person in this country on healthcare and disease management. $9,000 per person per year. The average for our trading partners, for our global competitors, is $3,500. And this is when things started to get really patriotic for me, because I thought, we're better than this. We're smarter than this. This is not how any of us want to be spending our money. How can we change this? Wouldn't we rather be putting that 18 cents towards something else? Towards creativity, innovation, entrepreneur, new businesses, things that we want to do, things that we believe in, things that we want to create, things that we want to innovate, positive things. How can we be allocating this differently? In the super conservative part of me, I kept turning to different data points, and I think probably in those first years, I was probably just hoping that it would tell a different story. That maybe it wasn't as bad as what the CDC was saying or what the President's Cancer Panel was saying. And so I turned to the CIA, which interestingly ranks life expectancy at birth. And there are just over 190 countries in the world, So the American in me is thinking, we're going to be in the top 10. We're America. We're going to be right at the top. So I start scrolling down this list. We're not in the top 10. We're not in the top 20. We're not in the top 30. We tend to hover in the low 40s, right around 50, next to countries like Bosnia. This was the CIA reporting this, and it absolutely blew my mind. I thought, how can we hold ourselves as the most developed country in the world and yet be failing in our health? What has changed? And so I started looking into things, what has changed? What was going on here? Why all of a sudden was this data? Epidemics like this don't just fall out of the sky. Genetics don't change this quickly. What had changed? And so I set up a system that I had set up always when I was an analyst, which was to capture incoming headlines every morning, whether they were financial headlines or healthcare headlines related to the companies that I covered. So I did that for food allergies. I set up that same system on food allergies. So every morning I'd wake up and my inbox would just be full of scientific studies and data and things that were happening in the food allergy world. And in October of 2006, I got this headline, and it said the EPA had just granted $440,000 to a small university in Michigan. And the title of the article was, "Do Genetically Engineered Foods Cause Food Allergies?" And I thought, what's a genetically engineered food? This was back in 2006. Nobody was talking about it. So when I started asking people about genetically engineered foods, I can promise you 10 years ago, they looked at me like I had 3 heads. Nobody knew what I was talking about. And I just thought, this doesn't make any sense. So the analytical part of me kind of dove into it, and I thought, what is this stuff? Where did it come from? And why is this researcher in Michigan worried about it causing food allergies? And so I called him and I said, I'm new, I have this daughter with food allergies, trying to kind of wrap my head around this and understand what's changed. And he said, yeah, we introduced genetically engineered foods into our food supply in the 1990s without any long-term testing. There were no animal testing models. So we're not going to knowingly introduce a known allergen, but that process creates what a lot of these scientists call genetic rubble. And that genetic rubble doesn't even have names, and there's no way yet to test for it. So that was what he had decided he was going to pursue in his scientific research. And I said, you mean we've introduced this into our food supply with no long-term testing, no animal testing models, and no labels? And he said, yeah, that's right. And I just thought, that sounds so un-American to me that I just didn't want to believe them. And so I turned to organizations like the World Health Organization, the United Nations, to see, were we the only ones that were doing this? And I learned that when we started introducing these genetically engineered ingredients into our food supply, all of our key trading partners, all of the developed countries around the world either said, no, thank you, we don't want them, or they labeled them. And I thought, why haven't we had that conversation here? And so I reached out to this large food allergy nonprofit organization in Washington, D.C. at the time. And I said, countries around the World Health Organization, were concerned around the allergenicity of genetically engineered foods. These foods are labeled for over 60% of the world. We label allergens, we label protein, we label fat, we label sugar. Why don't we label genetically engineered foods? And especially for food allergic families, why don't we label these things? And in that first year of this work, the only way to describe what happened when I brought it to the attention of this nonprofit in DC was that they had an allergic reaction to me. They started a campaign to keep me quiet. I could not unlearn what I had learned. And I wondered if other moms had had similar experiences or other scientists had. And I quickly learned that yes, they had. So I did what I knew how to do, and I pulled the financial statements of this nonprofit. And that's when I learned that their website at the time was 100% funded by Kraft, and that their medical board had working relationships with a company I had never heard of at the time called Monsanto.